Welcome to the premiere episode of Pop Culture Paradox. Theories nobody asked for. Today we examine the three Nosferatus, F.W. Murnau's, Werner Herzog's, and the latest by Robert Eggers.
My name is Dwayne Walker, and welcome to the first episode of Pop Culture Paradox. Now, when I say theories, really I'm talking about more film theory, which I'm really a big fan of. And the best way that I can describe film theory is to say it's a lot like dream interpretation. For instance, let's say if you wake up from a very pleasing dream that you enjoy, maybe a romantic dream, or you're traveling and you're in an exotic location that you like, you don't really question it that much. Of course you know why you dreamed that dream. Maybe things aren't going so well and this is subconsciously where you really wish you would be. Now on the other hand, let's say if you have a dream where you're surrounded with celebrities and suddenly all these celebrities start attacking you until you're practically dead and you wake up from that horrible nightmare, well, probably what your subconscious is telling you is you're spending way too much time in front of the TV set, and if you keep watching TV, eventually it will kill you because you won't get anything done. And so when we look at movies, it's almost like dream interpretation, except we're looking at the collective subconscious of the movie-going public, or for that matter, even the populace of America or whatever country you may be from, or maybe even the world. And take the three movies we're going to be discussing today, the three Nosferatus. Now, going back to the very first Nosferatu, the one that was directed by F.W. Murnau, one thing that's very clear, that's front and center, is this is a movie about the plague. He doesn't come out by saying this is a movie about vampires. Your very first thing you see is this is a movie about a plague that hit his city. And as we continue with the movie, of course, we see his boss, Nock, who sets him up for a meeting with Count Orlok. Then he has to travel vast distances to get to Transylvania to be there. And you kind of get the impression that something is going on between Orlok and Nock. This is something that's not really covered well. Most reviews that you see are set on Hutter's wife, Ellen, but very few are looking at Nock and whatever Nock's relationship is with Orlok, outside of the fact that Nock is the owner of the real estate business that is handling the real estate transaction. In any event, Hutter's wife wakes up with a nightmare in the original version, and I see this more as a premonition, not necessarily she woke up Orlok or that they had any kind of a relationship beforehand. That's purely a Francis Ford Coppola invention from his movie about Dracula. But her premonition is pretty strong. And when Hutter eventually meets Orlok at the castle, and of course we see the castle, and the cinematography is just brilliant. I would recommend looking at the version that's on Tubi, the 100-year-old anniversary special edition, which has great music to it. When he meets him, he's of course totally scared of him, and he just notices Orlok loading up everything to go to the small town in Germany, West Sierra, Germany. One thing that's driving Orlok isn't love, it's lust. He sees a picture of Ellen and decides that he wants to get to Germany immediately. So when he goes there, and of course he's on the ship, and he attacks everyone on the ship, and so everybody on the ship is dead, and the diaries reveal that they have a plague. Again, going back to the plague, which is the main concern of the movie when it first started. What's happening subconsciously in the audience's mind at the time is we're dealing with the time during the early 20th century when they were dealing with plagues. In Europe, they were dealing with the bubonic plague. We were also dealing with our own plague situation in the United States. People were wearing masks, and it was very, very a serious problem. And of course, one of the things that brings about plagues in general is just a general unhealthy practices. Of course, in Nosferatu, what's bringing about the plague is the fact that you have Count Orlok, a vampire, and need I say a foreigner, coming into the mist and of course polluting the area. And at the time, Murnau was accused of being anti-Semitic because basically what you see in Nosferatu, subconsciously, at least in the audience's mind, is kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to, we got to do something about these foreigners. They're coming to our land and they're giving us the plagues and all that. We saw a little bit of that when we were going through COVID, where Asian people were being attacked. And so that's something else that was going on subconsciously at the time. And so finally, after looking at the books that the gypsies gave Hutter when he was on his way to Transylvania, Ellen realizes that in order to stop the plague, she needs to basically keep Orlok busy until the cock crows, until the morning, until the daytime. And of course she does, and this costs her her life. But we can tell that it's a sacrifice on her part that she does for the greater good. Now, coming to the second Nosferatu, which of course is Werner Herzog's version, we see basically the same thing. Now, of course, in F.W. Murnau version, even though that was based on Dracula, he did the movie without getting any permission from Bram Stoker's estate. So Bram Stoker's widow had sued him, and part of the agreement was all the copies of Nosferatu had to be destroyed. And so the majority of them were, but one of them managed to survive. And so when he shot it, he gave them all sorts of different names, but he was shooting Dracula. That's what he was trying to shoot. And by the time Werner Herzog got to Dracula, the statute of limitations has run out, and so he was now able to use the names and ultimately trying to make the movie he felt that F.W. Murnau wanted to make, which was a movie about Dracula. Or in this case, in Werner Herzog's version, that's Renfield. Renfield is now the real estate boss. He's going crazy. He's going nuts. And he's laughing right at the beginning. So again, we don't see anybody talking about what kind of a relationship did Orlok and Renfield have at the beginning. So something's up there. But this time, Herzog really respects F.W. Murnau's version. And he says that it's the greatest piece of cinema to ever come out of Germany. And so he wants his movie to kind of be a bridge between the silent classic to modern audiences. And of course, by modern audiences, we're talking about those who saw it like I did around 1979, or as many people are watching it now for the first time here in 2025. Anything that could be considered remotely anti-Semitic is taken out of it. And then by the time we get to the plague, we see the rats. We know where the plague came from. It's leaving the ship after the ship itself was infected. And then in Herzog's version, of course, Mina, Jonathan Harker's wife, is shocked to find out he has absolutely no memory of who Mina is because he has been affected by Dracula. So when Mina finds out that she has to pretty much give up her life, well, she practically has no life now that Jonathan Harker, her husband, doesn't remember her at all. And so she pretty much keeps the Count busy as he sucks on her blood, and she gives up her life. And when the cock crows and daylight comes, the Count basically throws a fit. Now, in the Murnau version, he vanishes and just disappears. But not in Herzog's version. In Herzog's version, he just pretty much dies. And so the Van Helsing counterpart in Herzog's version drives a stake through his heart and is promptly arrested for murder. And Harker, because he has been infected by Dracula, basically asks the maid there to remove the consecrated wafers that Mina had put in front of him to keep him from going up into the room where she was going to be taking care of Dracula. And he has more business to take care of. And so he leaves and presumably just spreads the plague throughout the world. So in Murnau's version, everything happens according to folklore, according to necessity, and Orlok is taken care of. But in Herzog's version, he just winds up making matters worse. So even the best efforts still wind up spreading the plague. And by the time we come to the third Nosferatu, it's hard to tell where anybody royalties lie. I'll be honest, I came thinking that I was going to be enjoying this because I really did enjoy Robert Eggers' The Witch, and I really didn't care that much for it, most of it. The early parts where Hutter is approaching the castle were either so dark or so close up that it really left, I never really got a sense that there was any grandeur to the castle. He sees the gypsies do some kind of strange ritual where there's a virgin who's naked, who's on a horse, and they're going to dig up somebody that they think is a vampire. But why bother with this woman on the horse? Because the moment they open the casket, bam, they get him right in the heart, and he's gone. So I don't even know why we have the lady on the horse, but that's a different story. By the time we get to Orlok, of course, as everybody on the internet likes to point out, he has a mustache, which isn't that big a deal because Vlad Tepes, one of the inspirations behind Dracula himself, had a mustache. In the book Dracula by Bram Stoker, Dracula had a mustache at the beginning of the book. Christopher Lee and Jesse Franco's Count Dracula has a mustache. Gary Oldman does. But for some reason, everybody's making a big deal about this particular Orlok's mustache. And when we finally see Orlok, naked and with his mustache, I got to tell you, he didn't really strike me like a scary vampire. He struck me as repulsive. I certainly didn't want to look at him. And my first thought is, this is what the Christmas Nutcracker looks like if he's woken up in the morning and he has no clothes. That's what he looked like to me, just the Christmas Nutcracker. And as far as like this brilliant cinematography, I didn't really see any of that until the very end, until after Ellen gives up her life. Now, my problem with Ellen in the third Nosferatu giving up her life is what it says in the Gypsy's book in both the Murnau version and then Herzog's version is it has to be a pure woman. And of course, by pure, we're assuming this is a woman who hasn't had sex. Well, obviously, in the third version, it's a good woman. Now, but that still doesn't escape Hutter's mind. As far as Hutter's concerned, it's probably because she didn't have sex. And so he practically does what we would consider today raping your wife. She doesn't like it, and he plows into her. But ultimately, that doesn't stop Orlok. And she winds up really enjoying herself with Orlok. And it doesn't strike me as the kind of... I don't believe she was a sacrifice. I believe that it was just pure lust and desire on Ellen's part, just like it was pure lust and desire on Orlok's part. And, there's a definition of libertarianism or capitalism, which seems to say if you're doing the wrong thing for the worst of motives, somehow it benefits all. That's what this is an illustration of. Both Orlok and Ellen were, well, from their point of view, it wasn't wrong. From their point of view, it was probably very enjoyable. But for everyone else, they're doing the wrong thing for the worst of motives, and somehow it still worked for the benefit of all. And that's kind of how I view the third Nosferatu, as being nothing more than a work of capitalist invention to jumpstart a new franchise. It wouldn't surprise me if we see a Nosferatu Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. We already have a Nosferatu computer game out there. And so as far as the Nosferatus that inspire awe, I don't think you're going to be able to improve on F.W. Murnau's version or Werner Herzog's version. From here on out, though, Nosferatu is just a franchise. And one thing I'm struck of is how angry people are getting online when they're discussing Nosferatu. When some people come in and say, oh, I didn't like it, it was boring, I thought it was too dark, I didn't like what Orlok looked like, the people who think that this is the most brilliant movie ever made have one retort. You're stupid. You know nothing about cinema. And as far as I'm concerned, when you have to resort to personal attacks, you've already lost the argument. And I'm sure that the personal attacks on some of my opinions will be coming right now as well. But again, there's a reason that I'm subtitling this show, Theories Nobody Asked For. You didn't ask for it, but you got it. But thanks for watching this premiere episode of Pop Culture Paradox, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching Pop Culture Paradox. And if you liked what you see, please subscribe to this channel and like this video and come back for more.